The little-known Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896 is generally considered to be the shortest war in history, lasting for a grand total of 38 minutes. The story begins with the signing of the Heligoland-Zanzibar Treaty between Britain and Germany in 1890. This treaty effectively drew up spheres of influence between the imperial powers of East Africa. Zanzibar was ceded to British influence, while Germany was given control over mainland Tanzania. With this newfound influence, Britain declared Zanzibar a protectorate of British Empire and moved to install their own puppet Sultan to look after the region. Hamad bin Tawani, who had been a supporter of the British in this area, was given the position in 1893. Hamad ruled over this relatively peaceful protectorate for just until on August 25, 1896. He died suddenly in his palace. Although the truth will never be fully known about the causes of his death, it is widely believed that his cousin Khalid bin Bargash had him poisoned. This belief is compounded by the fact that within a few hours of Hamad's death, Khalid had already moved into the palace and assumed the position of Sultan, all without British approval. Needless to say, the local British diplomats were not all happy with this turn of events, and the chief diplomat in this area, Basil Cave, quickly declared that Khalid should stand down. Khalid ignored these warnings and instead started gathering his force around the palace. These forces were surprisingly well armed, although it's worth noting that quite a few of their guns and cannons were actually diplomatic gifts that had been presented to the former Sultan over the years. By the end of 25th August, Khalid had his palace secured with almost 3,000 men, several artillery guns, and even a modestly armed royal yacht in the nearby harbor. At the same time, the British already had two warships anchored in the harbor, the HMS Philomel and the HMS Rush. The troops were quickly being sent ashore to protect the British consulate and to keep the local population from the rioting. Cave also requested backup from another nearby British ship. The HMS Sparrow was entered the harbor on the evening of 25th August. Even though Cave had a significant armed presence in the harbor, he knew that he didn't have the authority to open hostility without express approval of the British government. Cave continued issuing ultimatums to Khalid, but to no avail. The next day, two more British warships entered the harbor, the HMS Raccoon and the HMS St. George. The final ultimatum to Khalid was issued on the 26th August, demanding that he leave the palace by 9 a.m. the next day. That night, Cave also demanded that non-military boats leave the harbor in preparation for war. At 9 a.m., the order was given to the British ships in the harbor to begin bombarding the palace. In 2 minutes, the majority of Khalid's artillery had been destroyed and the palace wooden structure had started to collapse with 3,000 defenders inside. 2 minutes after the bombardment started, that Khalid is said to have escaped through a back exit from the palace, leaving his servants and fighters to defend the palace alone. By 9:40, the shelling had ceased, the Sultan flag pulled down, and the shortest war in history had officially ended after only 38 minutes. For such a short war, the casualty rate was surprisingly high, with over 500 of Khalid's fighters killed or wounded, mainly due to the high explosive shells exploding on the palace. One British petty officer was also severely injured but later recovered in hospital. With Khalid out of the way, the UK was free to place the pro-British on the throne of Zanzibar, and he ruled on behalf of Her Majesty's government for the next 6 years. As for Khalid, he managed to escape with a small group of loyal followers to the local German consulate. Despite repeated calls from the British for his extradition, he was smuggled out the country on October 2nd by the German Navy and taken to modern-day Tanzania. It was not until British forces invaded East Africa in 1916 that Khalid was finally captured and subsequently taken to Saint Helena for exile. After surviving time, he was later allowed to return to East Africa, where he died in 1927.